folks in the audience. My name is Zor Morales, and I'm an alumni of the program. Graduated about 2.5 years ago, and just really loving the real estate business out here in Hawaii. My wife and I have been doing pretty well, and decided to stick around the program and help folks with bridging the gap, going from real estate or going from military into real estate. For those new folks as well, if you don't mind turning on your camera, if you're in a safe situation, if you're driving or doing something else, don't worry about it. And then also feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask a question or add anything to what I'm talking about today. And I'll also be dropping the topic request link in the chat box. So if you want to hear about anything in particular, you can go ahead and go on that link and anonymously post what you want to hear about, or you can also ask on here in the chat box or unmute yourself. So today we'll be talking about building a CMA. So last week we had a request to talk about building a CMA. So that's what we're doing this week. And I just dropped the presentation in the chat box. I won't be doing the share screen for that portion. So you can just open up that PDF and follow along. Just admitting a few other people into the group. Alrighty, I'm gonna start with the presentation. So if you're following along, I'm on slide 1. And for those people that just joined, we're talking about building a CMA. So communicating the value of real estate to your audience, because that could be your clients, the appraiser you're working with, the lister, the listing agent that you're sending an offer to, etc. So who has heard of the term CMA? Anybody? Adina? Yeah, so you may have, for those of you who have not heard of the term CMA, you might have heard of it being referred to in a different way. Some of the common terms, the comps, which is short for the comparables, comparable because CMA is short for comparable market analysis. The data, my personal preference is referring to it as the recently sold data. Property valuation and home value estimate. Those last two you might see on postcards that you get from realtors in the mail or lenders. They're sending you a little flyer about, hey, do you want a free property valuation of your home to see what it's worth? And then you scan a QR code or go to their website and they get your information and reach out to you. Same thing, home value estimate. Yeah, they're using that as a way to connect with you, so that you can have that conversation with them about whether you want to sell or if you want to refinance your home, all that stuff. So those are some common terms that you'd hear the CMA being referred to as. And so what is a CMA? So now we're on slide 3 of 7. And put simply, a CMA is the best educated guess at the market value of a property. And so I underlined educated because if you just make a guess at a property, it's just a guess. It's not really comparing a property to anything. And then also put market value in bold because that's really what it's boiling down to. You're trying to determine what the market value of a home is based off of the information. And so the market value definition I pulled from the VA Lender's Manual, and also be sending you guys a link for that. Just a sidetrack note on that. Anytime you hear people talking about that's like talking about the way that things are, or we do it this way because that's just how we do it. You always want to look, just like in the military, you want to look at the pub, like what does the pub say? And so I've ran into this multiple times, and because I grew up in the pilot community in the Marine Corps, where that's all you ever hear, what does the pub say? I wanted to look at what did the pub say about that particular rule. For example, the limit for the amount of credits that a buyer can get from a seller, most people know it as 4%. However, there's really no firm limit on that. It might depend on like the bank you're working with, but the common rule that people know of is 4%. So the max, like if you buy $1 million house, the max the seller could credit the buyer is 4% of that, which would be 40,000. However, if you look at the pub, there's ways you can use additional credits towards paying down the VA funding fee, paying off credit card debt that the buyer might have. There's like a bunch of different ways you can use it, but a lot of times people they don't know the very surface level rule, and so they just stop at that. Back to the topic in progress. So the definition of market value, according to the VA Lender's Manual, is the most probable price that a property should bring in a competitive and open market. And it underlies most probable because when you're talking to an appraiser or a listing agent or a client, they might tell you, well, I think it's possible for my house to sell for 50,000 more than you're saying that it's worth. Um, or maybe like if you're on the listing side and somebody's like, oh, well, it's possible that the market's going to crash. And so we're offering half the amount that you're listing this house for. And so the key here is most probable. So looking at the data, looking at the history of what's sold in that area, and determining what the market value is. And then and it also says that a property should bring in a competitive and open market. So if somebody's selling a house and they just tell a small network of people, then it's not the open market and it's not a competitive and open market. So just keep that in mind. Because a lot of times you might encounter a seller that they say they want their house to be sold to a specific family, or they don't want it to be sold to investors, stuff like that. And so if that happens, then you want to let them know that it's not a open market, that if you're showing them the data that's based on the open market. And so if they think they're going to get this house sold for the top dollar but they only want a certain type of person to buy it, not only is that illegal, but it would also restrict them from getting that open market value. And then the other part that I bolded on that definition, VA considers reasonable value and market value to be synonymous. VA's definition of market value is consistent with that used by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and major appraisal organizations. And the reason I bolded that is because back in the day, the VA loan and people in here who bought homes back in 15, 20 years ago might have experienced that, where the VA loan, so VA buyers were kind of looked down upon because of the more strict terms that appraisers use and that are kind of associated with the VA loan. However, these days, it's really not the case. VA loans are sometimes seen as more favorable than other types of loans because of the backing on the loan, and then also how the zero down requirement. So it just makes it a lot easier for people to make it all the way through the qualification process. Alrighty, so 3 factors that I like to focus on when generating a CMA. So on slide 5, the three items: time, distance, and likeness. So time being as close as possible to the present time frame, or the time frame that you're trying to base the estimated value off of. So if I'm comparing, so like yesterday we just handed keys to a new set of homeowners. Their house was built in 1922 and it's now 2024. So if I did a CMA and I was trying to convince the seller, okay, this house is only worth $100,000, and I went all the way back to 1922 in the MLS, the estimated value is not going to be very accurate because it's completely different time. All the inflation that has happened with the dollar, all the changes in how the world works, everything. And so you want to get as close as possible to the time frame that you're looking at for estimating the value of that home. And I put these 3 factors kind of in order of importance. Time and distance, I think, are pretty close to a tie, but I definitely think time is the most important, and then distance being second. So distance meaning you have a subject property and you want to be as close as possible to that subject property with the properties that you're comparing it to. So comparing this 5,000 square foot piece of land that sold here about 2 years ago, sold for $5 million. So if I was comparing that to a 5,000 square foot piece of land in Arizona, it'd be drastically different. And so if you look at the factors that come into play, so the most obvious one, Hawaii versus Arizona, vacation destination versus mainland state with little to no water for water activities. That land was also um, beachfront on one of the nicest beaches on the island compared to like a 5,000 square foot land in the middle of the desert. So the closer the better. And even on this island, like neighborhood to neighborhood, it can be a drastic difference in value. So getting as close as possible to the subject property is ideal. And there will be situations where, based off of the time frame that you're looking at, and based off the distance, there's like one or two properties that have sold, and that's when you want to add in other factors, like the style of the home, all that stuff, and then as well as you can go further back in the timeline and kind of create a chart showing the progression of value in that neighborhood and use sales that happened in the past couple of years instead of just in the past 6 months, which is typically what appraisers will look at. And then the last item, likeness. So you can consider likeness to mean a few different things. The main one that comes to mind for me, especially here in Hawaii, is comparing a single family home versus a leasehold property. So single family meaning you own the property, the land, and it's not in a condo association or a townhome association. It might be a homeowner association, but it's a very minimal fee. And so the value of that is going to be drastically different than a leasehold. A leasehold here, you might have it in a few other states. I think maybe Florida and Alaska. But so leasehold, you own, in the case of a townhome, you own the structure, but not the land. In the case of a condo, you own again, the structure, what's inside the four walls, but not the airspace. And then with a single family home that's leasehold, you own the house, but not the land. And so an example I like to show to clients is there's this house down the street from where I live on this man-made lake, and it's listed for $300,000. And so people see that, not knowing the difference between leasehold and fee simple, and they're like, "This is an awesome deal. Like I'm surprised nobody has bought it." And you look at the cost of renewing the lease, and the renewing the lease is like 1.5 million. So you think you're getting this house for $300,000. In reality, if you manage to make it all the way through escrow without realizing it's leasehold, you would pay 300,000 or finance 300,000 for the loan to purchase the structure, and then you'd have to renew that lease, which is 1.5 million. So you're really paying 1.8 million for that property. But other factors that would determine likeness would be like if it's a single level versus multi-level, because in some areas people might prefer single level, or if it's a property with additional dwelling unit, ADU, so it has the ability to generate rental income. A lot of times that will add a lot of value. So if you have a house that's two houses, one's 4 bed, 3 bath, well, they're both 4 bed, 3 bath, but one of them is split up into a 2-1 and a 2-2, and then the other one is just a complete single family 4 bed, 3 bath. The house that's split up, that has a wet bar and a kitchen, that can generate rental income, that one's probably going to be worth more than the house that's just one complete house, because of the ability to generate rental income. Because if there's a person buying the complete house, they're gonna have to pay that whole mortgage by themselves, whereas the other one, they can find people to rent out half of the house. Alrighty, so that's the three key factors that I look at. There's lots of other factors you can dive into and that appraisers and other folks dive into, but as long as you look at those main three, you'll be in a good position. And then slide 6. So uses for a CMA. It's like, what is this sheet with all this information on it? What is it good for? And I'll drop the so you guys can start looking at it. This is a CMA that I made for the house that I told you guys about that was 100 years old. So what are these good for? advising on offers. So you might have a client that you take them on a few showings, they finally find their dream property. They're like, I love this house. I know it's listed for 700,000, but it's been really competitive. I don't want to miss out on this opportunity. This is the house. And so I want to offer $1 million for this $700,000 house. And so that's when you put on your advising hat and advise them that this house, based off of the data, the recently sold data, this house is worth at most 750. And they might look at you and tell you they don't care, but you want to remind them that you're there to look out for them and you don't want them to overpay. And so based on the data, this is what it's worth. You're more than welcome to offer whatever amount you want to offer, but I just want you to keep in mind that this is what it's worth. Especially because other factors can come into play, like the appraisal gap, which is a term you can build into your offer, or it's a situation you'll run into if you don't have that term built in there. So let's say you advise your client, hey, this place is only worth 750 and you want to offer $1 million. You offer $1 million, get accepted, appraiser comes out, yeah, this house is only worth 750. So now you have a $250,000 gap if they're doing financing. So their 750 is being financed because whatever the appraiser says it's worth is what the bank will pay for it. And then you have to come to the table with the other 250. You might, in some situations, if that gap was a lot smaller, you might be able to negotiate with the seller and say, hey, I know we offered you 800. Appraiser said it's only worth 750. My buyer doesn't have any cash. Will you come down in price to 750? And a lot of times you can get some kind of a reduction in price doing that. But yeah, you want to educate your buyer on that. And if that really is their absolute dream home, they want that beachfront property or whatever it is, and they don't want to miss out by someone else beating them on the offer, just let them know what the data says about it and if they want to make up the difference with cash. Updating owner clients. So after you help that client buy their dream home, you can send them a message 6 months or a year later. Hey, here's the progression of your home's value. Just wanted to touch base with you and see how you're doing. And here's an update. And that's a good way to stay in contact with your clients as years go on, especially military clients, because by year 3, more than likely going to be PCSing and making the decision to either rent or sell that property. And then it gives you the opportunity to represent them in selling their home. Winning new seller clients, so people that are already homeowners in your area, reaching out to them. So if you've heard of touches, like using a certain number of touches to finally get a hold of somebody, you can use this as one of those touches. People do the CMA a day, which is you generate a CMA and send it to a different client a different owner in your neighborhood every day. And then over the course of a year, you've sent out 365 CMAs, and chances are at least one of those will contact you, or you'll have the opportunity to converse with them about selling their home. Brokerage requirements. So in Hawaii, for EXP Hawaii, it's a requirement for us to generate a CMA and provide that with the listing agreement to the broker for review. Might be same thing in your state, but yeah, just to show them, hey, this person wants to list their home for 700,000. Here's the data showing that that's a reasonable price. And then advising on list price. So you go talk to a client and they want to list for a really low amount. So I actually did have that happen with the client that was selling their single family home. So they're in the process of buying a replacement property, and they needed a certain amount to make up the difference between the loan balance and the purchase price, because they're doing the loan assumption. And so they did the math, and they were kind of looking at Zillow to see what kind of money they could pull in for their property. And they told me they wanted to list for 1.4, which this is where you step in, looking out for them and being their advisor, providing this information as the expert on the real estate market. And so I looked at the data for their neighborhood, for the town that we live in, and it looked like we'd had the opportunity to sell for 150,000 more than what they wanted to list for. So they want to list for 1.4, and that would provide them enough money to make up that gap. I saw the data. I saw that we could sell for more, not only make up that gap, but put a little more money into their pocket to, pay off other debts that they had or just put towards savings. And so we went on market for 150 more than what they thought their home was worth. And we ended up selling 50K above that. So $200,000 more than what they wanted. So that was a pretty awesome experience being able to be a part of that. And that's when you win clients that love you, that want to tell all their friends about you. They've tagged me multiple times on these Facebook groups when somebody's asking for a realtor, and so that's you looking out for them instead of just wanting a quick sell. Because if I listed it for 1.4, we maybe would have gotten an offer for 1.45 or even 1.5, but they would still have been missing out on some additional money they could have made off of that sale. And then last item that I listed for possible uses is providing this to the appraiser. So I've sat through a couple appraisals. A lot of times it's like a 15-minute process. They jump out of their car. Sometimes it's two people. They take a few measurements, take a few pictures, and boom, they're gone. And they're like, all right. And then what's really happening is that they're looking at the information that either you provide for them or that they generate, or both, and then they determine what that house is worth. And the majority of their decision is based off of what has recently sold in that neighborhood. And so if you're the one generating that data and you're, kind of taking out the crappy listings that really don't match up, or maybe like adding in ones that kind of show the potential of that property. Maybe it's a house that needs a lot of work, and it's like, hey, this property is worth this amount based off of all the improvements they did. And so you can include all that information in a nice package for the appraiser so that they can have that information to quickly reference. Otherwise, if you don't provide them with anything, they might be having a bad day. Maybe you were late to let them in for the appraisal, and you threw off their whole schedule. They go back home and they're like, man, screw this person. I'm going to appraise this place $100,000 below what it's being purchased for. So just keep that in mind. And then on the last slide that I provided to you guys, and I'll just drop that in the chat one more time in case people that joined late. So last slide is just two links, one to the VA Lender's Handbook, which is located in the WARMS, WARMS, and then also the HUD, basically the HUD equivalent of that same item. And again, you want to reference the pub so you can tell agents who have been in the business for 20 years that they're wrong because this is what the pub says. That has happened multiple times. Not the best way to get your offer accepted, but it's a good way to prove that they're not right about what they're thinking. And I'm just going to drop the CMA one more time in the chat box, and then I'm going to show you guys a quick hands-on creation or building of a CMA. I like to say that it's building because if you build something with crappy materials, then it's going to be a crappy product. And so if you put the time and thought, effort into building a quality CMA, it'll be a strong product that you can use to win clients, to convince the appraiser that it's worth what it's being purchased for, so on and so forth. All right, I'm gonna share my screen. Any questions while I pull this up? Alrighty. So this is what my MLS looks like. And so you may see that the PDF that I dropped for the CMA, you might see that it looks like really complicated. Like you're gonna have to brush up on your Excel skills and your PowerPoint skills and put 5 hours into generating this product. But if you have a decent MLS, it'll provide you the ability to do it within a few seconds. You should not only take a few seconds to generate a CMA, you should put the time in to really make sure it makes sense and that it accurately portrays the reasonable value of the property. But it's not that difficult to do to physically generate one of those CMAs. So for us, we just go search residential quick, kind of pulls up this same site. And then go to sold. And so automatically it pulls up 180 in my MLS, and that's the number that most appraisers use. And if you look at the pub for both the HUD and VA loan, you'll see that 6 months is the ideal time frame. And they also have ideal distances that they look at. And then, so if it's outside of those parameters, the appraiser has to write a letter why they, or some kind of note on why they chose to use other properties. So I look at my map, sold in the last 180 days. And then I want to look at these condos over here. So let's say I'm buying a house, and I'll do active and sold. So let's say I have a listing over here, one of these. So this right here is a 2-bed, 2-bath, 1191 square feet, and it's that was not active. See, this one's active. So 3-bed, 2-bath, 1591 square feet. It's listed for 1.235. So I'm trying to advise my client on what's a good offer for this and what is it actually worth. So if I, with the last 180 days, that should have been narrowed down a little bit. Let me do, so that's in the Kamalanai building complex. And so you can see down here, there's 6 matches for the last 180 days. So if I wanted to, I could just generate a CMA right off of that. So here's the properties. However, you'll see that there's only been 2 3-bed units and then 4 2-bedroom units. And so going back to likeness, you want to get as close as possible to what that property is, because how drastically it can change the square footage, the location within the building, all those other factors. So you want to get as close as possible. This is what we have for now for this particular scenario. So I highlight all of them. Nice quick CMA. And boom, there's a CMA. However, like I said, you want to put a lot more thought into it. If I don't feel like these are accurately, like maybe if all the 3-bedroom units are front and they have like ocean view or something like that, maybe I want to find more 3-bedroom units, or maybe I'll extend the time frame to get a more accurate value of that. So maybe I'll put a minimum of 3 bedrooms, and I'll go back, say 2 years, so 730 days. And yeah, so now I have all these units to work with, so a total of 7. And so I can generate data off of that, because those are all 3-bedroom units. They're all about the same square footage, all same location within the building. And so just depending on the situation, you can put that extra thought, all the extra effort to make sure it's as accurate as possible. So here's the CMA. And so when you're talking through this and when you generate a CMA in your MLS, it'll probably look similar to this. Might have a few other factors added in, or maybe not all the same things. But the big things you want to look at, and tools that you can use to communicate value to your client, price per square foot. So this just takes the price of the home, divides it by the amount of square feet, and boom, gives you this number. So like if you're selling a 1-bedroom unit and there hasn't been anything sold but 3 and 2-bedroom units for the past 5 years, you can communicate to them, hey, based off of this price per square foot. So you take the number for those 3 beds or 2-bed units, multiply it by the square footage of that 1-bed unit, and you're like, hey, these other ones are worth this much. This 1-bedroom unit would be worth 800,000 based off of the price per square foot. And then depending on how competitive the market is, you can also talk to them about sell price to list price. So this is just the price that it's finally sold for divided by the price it was listed for. And so you can see right here, there's 3 100s. So 3 of those units sold for what they were listed for, and 2 of them sold for slightly less than what they were listed for. So you can, if you have a client that's like, oh yeah, I really want a deal. I'm a hard bargainer. I like to bargain with the grocery store, even though you can't do that. So I want to get a deal on this house. I want to get this place for 30% below list price. And you're like, well, based off of the data, that's not going to happen, because the lowest property I sold for is 4% below list price. And then you can even, if you have like someone that's real stubborn, you can pull up data for the past 5-10 years and show them historically what properties have sold for based off of the list price, just to show them like, hey, you're more than welcome to make that offer and I'll write that offer for you, but I'm probably going to give the listing agent a heads up that it was your decision, because I don't want to be disrespectful by offering half the amount that you're actually offering for. And yeah, here's the data. Home is never sold for 30% below list price in this area. And yeah, so then that's sell price, list price. Other factors on here, days on market. So if a house has been sitting there for a while, you can kind of educate them that they can maybe offer a little bit less because it's been sitting for so long. And then yeah, all the other key details all in a nice organized manner. And then down at the bottom, it has the averages. So the minimum, I like to reference that because if maybe a seller is uneasy, they're worried their house won't sell for much, so they maybe want to hold off for a while or whatever it is. And you show them this, hey, the minimum your house will sell for based off of the data is $1,020,000. The max, or if you have somebody that's really greedy and they're like, I want to sell my condo for $2 million, like, all right, here's the data. The max you can get based off of the data is 1.2. We can list for 2 million if you want to, but it's highly unlikely. And then averages, obviously, so you can help them estimate price per square foot, or based off of the averages, advise them on list price, so on and so forth. So that was a quick how to build the CMA. Your MLS might be different, but that's how it's built in mine. And quick little scoop on what a CMA is and how it's important. What are your questions? Anything? You can drop in the chat box or meet yourself.
I appreciate that, Zor. So I'm just gonna kind of talk through my thing today. So like I told you, I had a FISBO in my area that I set up an appointment for today at 11, and I kind of did everything that you just said, and went into the MLS, kind of try to got what was sold. We had about 5 properties that were in the subdivision that sold at his at least his square footage, just about close enough. And so kind of offered him and told him what that price range would be. And it was, I think, maybe $4,000 off of what he wanted to sell it for. So that was the good thing. The negative thing is that he already had a person that he promised to sell or to list his property with. And he just wanted to, like, at least just kind of get a secondary opinion, I guess. And he allowed me to come, got a chance to walk through the property, to do some videos. And then on the positive side, he wanted to get some painting done, and I just happened to know a painter, and was able to kind of recommend that to him so he can get the property listed a little bit quicker. But I think what I learned going through that whole process is, like you said, being that prepared and knowing what to kind of speak to and speak of from an educated standpoint made the huge difference, because he felt comfortable. And then of course the conversation led into other things, and him giving me other people to kind of reach out to and talk to that potentially would like to list. So I appreciate that feedback that you gave me and set me up.
Thanks for sharing, Clark. It's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. It's great that you recognize that it's like a lot of people who are just in it for the money. They would see that and be like, oh crap, that was a waste of my time. I just put time into generating all this information for him, and now I'm not even going to list with him. So much for trying to make some money off of that. But you see the value in that. You see that you had the opportunity to practice. You had the opportunity to make a friend, to help a friend, your painter friend, get some business. You made a good impression on him, and he knows maybe he'll, yeah, like you said, refer you to a neighbor or somebody else, friend of his that's selling. So that's awesome that you're able to identify that it wasn't a loss, it was a gain overall in that experience. But I would also say to still keep in touch. You don't have to be like these snaky agents out there will talk trash about you, which happened to me one time when I was just starting out. I had a fellow veteran. She's kind of sad. She was talking trash, saying that, oh, this guy's brand new. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Absolutely did not work with him. Um, I still ended up working with a client. The client chose me because that person was being a snake. You don't have to be like that. You can just be, hey, how's everything going? How'd the painting turn out? Um, anything else I can help you with? And like be there to help them out, because maybe something happens with the other client, like, or the other realtor, they're not able to get them all the way to listing, and you're right there ready to help them out. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Clark. It's awesome. Any other questions or anything people want to share? Doesn't have to be related to CMAs. I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.